Let me introduce you to a Russian journalist, Dmitry Kozhurin, whom you will see almost every day on the channel Current Time, talking about the war in Ukraine.
Следственный комитет возбудил уголовное дело по факту нападения на Брянскую область, а на тех кадрах, которые сегодня были опубликованы ФСБ, видны две машины, которые в четверг якобы были уничтожены теми самыми украинскими диверсантами.
Current Time is a Russian-language TV channel with an editorial office in Prague, Czech Republic. It was set up by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty and Voice of America. It is funded by the US Congress and is supposed to promote democratic values by providing uncensored news, reporting and responsible exchange of ideas. Voice of America broadcasts in 48 languages and its Russian service is one of the oldest. But Voice of America has never had a separate Ukrainian language TV channel, leaving many Ukrainians to watch Current Time in Russian instead of the monopolistic and rather limited United News Marathon on Ukrainian television. The Current Time YouTube channel has over 3 million subscribers and based on site statistics, it is watched almost equally in Ukraine and Russia.
Волна протестов, преодолев все часовые пояса России, добралась до Москвы и до Санкт-Петербурга.
I have watched several of Kozhurin's report and didn't find anything that screamed betrayal. He says smart things, called the war a war and generally doesn't raise any concerns. He is such a good Russian that he is even invited onto the Ukrainian state-owned Freedom Channel, Russian Language One.
Все мероприятия проходят в отеле в паре десятков километров от центра Вильнюса.
But Kozhurin hasn't been working at Current Time that long, so I became curious about where he worked before. I did some digging and, to put it mildly, was surprised. By the way, I'm Nazar and you're at YouTube channel where I make complicated and interesting things simple. Please subscribe and like this video that more people will see it.
Бывший футболист сборной России Марат Измайлов перешел в Порту.
In 2013, Kozhurin was a sports anchor before moving on to the Russian channel Zvezda, where, for example, he reported on local soldiers taking their military oath. At the time, Russia has already occupied part of eastern Ukraine and Crimea.
Торжественный ритуал по уже сложившейся традиции проходит в зале славы Центрального музея Великой Отечественной войны на Поклонной горе.
Zvezda is a Russian patriotic state television channel fully owned and operated by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Kozhurin worked there at least from 2014 to 2017. He was listed on the Zvezda website as a channel-owned correspondent. Here's one of his reports from 2017.
На данный момент центр города полностью оцеплен.
Channel Zvezda raises lots of questions. There are some of the topics that journalists have reported on. Nazi zombies are fighting in the Ukrainian army in Donbass. Europe wants to replace the population of Ukraine with refugees. The visa-free regime with Europe will transform Ukraine into a gay colony of the West. Czechoslovakia should be grateful for 1968, and lots more. Kozhurin has been living in Spain since 2016, and there's little information about what he did after Zvezda, other than being a guide for tourists in Barcelona. And then, in early 2022, Kozhurin begins covering the war in Ukraine and protests in Russia, and appears on Freedom Channel. He undergoes a harsh transformation.
Поводом для обвинения Марии Алехиной в пропаганде нацизма стал пост в Инстаграме еще 7-летней давности.
Now Kozhurin is a liberal journalist who speaks critically about the Russian regime on an American channel. I asked Dmitry for a comment, but at the time the video was made, I have not received a response.
А вот вам и я.
But Dmitry Kozhurin is just the tip of the iceberg of the Voice of America Russian service. He is not well known and familiar only to viewers of the Current Time channel. Last autumn, Gary Knignitsky started working on the Voice of America Russian service. Before that, he worked at the Russia propaganda channel NTV, where, among other things, he said Ukrainian soldiers were firing artillery based on civilians' mobile phone signals. At the same report from 2014, Knignitsky says that residents of Russian-occupied territories are ready to take up arms, meaning joining Russia's occupying force against Ukraine. In his report, Gary says Russian militants are forced to return fire, otherwise Ukrainian tank would destroy a residential neighborhood. Knegnitsky calls the war in eastern Ukraine a genocide against the people of Donbass and writes about Ukrainian children who voluntarily moved from the war to Russia. Knegnitsky also created a report about the detention of the terrorist group of Ukrainian film director Oleg Sentsov, after which Sentsov spent 5 years in Russian captivity. None of his reports from that time speak about Russian aggression, and Gary refers to the Russian fighters as militias and the self-defense of Donbass. In 2017, Knegnitsky leaves NTV and says in an interview that he no longer wants to keep bending.
Я просто сам себе задал вопрос: слушай, ну ты правда сейчас будешь, ты дальше будешь? Потому что дальше тебя прогнут, может быть, до какой-то другой степени.
Knegnitsky then starts working in New York for the Russian-language TV channel RTVI, where in a report about the protests after the murder of George Floyd, he writes, "Because where there are black people, there is crime." Any normal American media would have fired him on the spot, but guess what consequences Gary faced for saying that? Correct, none. Turns out, after leaving NTV, Knegnitsky forgot to change his position again, and in 2019, when Russia seized Ukrainian ships in the Kerch Strait, he said that Ukraine has provoked Russia, and it wasn't clear who was at fault.
Почему в этот раз этот инцидент все-таки возник? Как мы понимаем, с российской точки зрения, украинцы, об этом говорит российская сторона, украинцы не предоставили всех необходимых заявлений о проходе.
Since starting at Voice of America, Knegnitsky rhetoric has changed somewhat. He criticized Russia and even allows himself to call the war a war. Another journalist working at the Voice of America Russian service since autumn 2022 is Daria Davidova, who before that worked for state-owned Russian television and justified Russia's occupation of Crimea. For years, these and many other journalists promoted Russian propaganda. But when things got messy, they changed positions and partially changed sides. And it was these artificially created opinion leaders who laid the foundation of this modern war, helping the Russian regime zombify its own population and part of Ukraine's. They were the ones who promoted and continue to promote the idea there are other Russians, good liberal ones, and only Putin is to blame, and everyone else doesn't want war. Sanctions should be lifted and Russophobia is unnecessary. I am a bit curious. Did Putin personally kill people in Bucha, launch the rocket at Dnipro city in January or at Kharkiv at February? Did Putin steal toilets and blow up the Skovoroda museum? Maybe he was personally driving the APC to capture Kyiv in 3 days, and when that didn't happen, all these media workers did a U-turn, realizing that they didn't want to be in the court seats near to their leadership. After moving to the Voice of America Russian service, Knegnitsky said about his previous job, "The management forbid me from appearing live with Ukrainians who were talking about Russian shelling and killing. Voice of America gave me the opportunity to tell the truth about the war." It seems that he wanted to speak the truth, but the evil managers of NTV forbade him to do this. The strategy of shifting blame to others was very popular at the Nuremberg trials, where the Nazis justified the bloodiest crimes against humanity by saying these were only orders that could not be disobeyed. One should understand, it is indeed difficult to be a journalist in modern Russia. A real journalist there has only 3 options: to die, to go to prison, or to leave the country. But if before fleeing a journalist goes to Crimea to talk about how happy the Crimeans are under occupation, or to Donbass for stories about so-called civil war, it is propaganda, not journalism, and he or she should be held responsible. After these propagandists were exposed in November 2022, 15 employees of the Voice of America Russian service signed a letter calling for their dismissal, and in February 2023 the letter was published. Despite this, on the February 23, the management of the Voice of America Russian service came out in support of the propagandists, saying that no violations were found on their editorial work or at their previous jobs. Knignitsky and Davidova were put on leave while they were being investigated. I have a question. Why is the channel management turning a blind eye to this violation of journalist standards and blatant work spreading Russian propaganda? The Voice of America Russian service is led by Irina Van Dusen, who is currently on a long-term leave and is being replaced by editor Arkady Cherepansky, a former advisor to the Belarus embassy to the US. One of the reporters at the Voice of America Russian service office in New York is Mikhail Gutkin, a former employee at the very same Russian NTV channel. And it appears that he sees nothing wrong with his former propagandist colleagues working for an American state-owned network. One of his new colleagues is Victoria Kupchinetsky, a former editor of the program Today in America at, you guessed it, NTV. According to anonymous sources at Voice of America, she is Gutkin's common-law wife and is involved in decision-making.
Это юбилейное 90-е зажжение елки у центра Рокфеллера.
According to the anonymous sources in Voice of America, these problems was indeed discussed, but the issue wasn't the propagandists themselves, but how to appease the dissenters. It seems all of the journalists will continue to work at the channel and get paid nicely at the expense of the American taxpayer. I want to add that there are professional journalists working at Voice of America Ukrainian language and Russian language offices who do not have experience in spreading Russian propaganda, but those who do cast a shadow on the entire Voice of America network. I hope that I was able to tell this story well and without unnecessary emotions. If you have watched this far, let me remind you that this is an independent channel and it exists thanks to your donation. So if you like this video, please support it financially. You can find the information on how to do this in the video subscription. Thanks for watching and see you!